Hey, what's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at the Audeze Euclid. Now, before we get into today's review, just a little disclaimer that this Euclid was provided for review by Audeze, but I am not paid or influenced in any way to say anything in particular about them. I was just loaned these in exchange for my honest feedback, so once again, big thanks to Audeze for providing these for review. Now, the Audeze Euclid is Audeze's first foray into a fully closed-back planar-magnetic IEM. Audeze has made several planar-magnetic IEMs in the past, but they have all been open back, like this iSine LX here. So this is their, like I said, their first take into finally closing off the back of their planar magnetic IEMs, which is very nice because, like I think I've mentioned in the past before, the open back IEMs are a little bit strange to me, so I'm glad we finally have a fully closed IEM from Audeze. So today we will see what I think about the Euclid. So let's go ahead and get specs out of the way. So the Audeze Euclid is coming in at $1,300. It is using an 18mm planar magnetic driver with an impedance of 12 ohms, a sensitivity of 105 dB milliwatt, and a frequency response of 10 to 50,000 hertz. Okay, so let's talk about the build of the Euclid. So zooming y'all in here. So the Euclid is kind of an all-metal body with carbon fiber faceplate and a little bit of a gold accent ring with the gold Audeze logos on the faceplate. I wouldn't say it's the most premium feeling IEM I've felt for around its price point, but it feels acceptable, I guess, in terms of build. MMCX connectors, which I'm not happy about, of course, because I'm not a big fan of MMCX, and the old iSines use 2-pin, which is the better connector. But I guess given the shape, I could see why they had to use MMCX. So I guess it feels acceptable for its price point. Now, in terms of comfort, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's a very weird bulbous shape, as you can see. And the way that I found you kind of have to insert them is you kind of have to like insert the tip and then twist them straight. So kind of insert, twist like that. And once you do that, I find them decently comfortable, but I can't wear them for I would say more than maybe an hour without them starting to hurt my inner ear. It touches a lot of your inner ear given how fat and a weird shape it is. So I think that these are going to be a little bit rough for a lot of people. If you have larger ears, might be okay. If you have smaller ears, I can see this probably being a problem. But for me, it's okay comfort, but not the absolute best comfort, and I'm not the biggest fan of this shape. So that is the build on the Euclid. All right, so now for included accessories. So you get like a little Pelican 1010 style case with a little foam insert in there to hold the IEMs, as well as a little carrying bag and a bunch of different tip options, as well as like spin fits and whatever tips that Audeze had made for these. And then as for cables, you get this cable, so MMCX cable, 3.5 millimeter. Not a big fan of this cable. It's kind of stiff for my liking, and it's a weird braid. It's just kind of like a black braid, but it's like a circular braid, or I don't even know what kind of braid this is. It's a very strange braid and it's kind of stiff. I would probably go ahead and get a replacement cable for these. Just any MMCX IEM cable will work, but not the biggest fan of the cable on the Euclid. Now, as for power requirements, I usually don't talk about it with IEMs, and honestly, there's nothing really to talk about with it on this one either. I thought I would just mention it given that it's a planar magnetic IEM, and when I reviewed the 10P2 right here, I mentioned that that was like insanely hard to drive. Not so on the Euclid, so don't worry about anything. Phone or wherever can drive these, no problem. They are not hard to drive like the P2 was. Okay, so now moving into the sound of the Audeze Euclid. So starting off with frequency response as always. So the Euclid have a bit of a base shelf. They have about a 5 dB base shelf that rolls off by the time you hit around 200 hertz. After that, moving up into your mid-range, so the pinna gain on these is a little bit off to me. It starts too late. It starts coming up at like around 1.5K, where really just start pulling up right around 1K. And it's centered at around 2 kilohertz, which is a little bit, or it's like too severe of a ramp up from like 1.5 to 2K. Your 2K, I would say maybe 4 or 5 dB above where I would personally like it. It's a little bit too shouty for me. And then your 3 to 4K is a touch recessed to me. And then there's a little bit of like a 5.5 kilohertz peak and sine sweep that is kind of annoying. And then your treble is forward and like that 7-8K region. Forward, I would say maybe 3 or 4 dB. And then you have a decent bit of above 10 kilohertz air. And that is about it for the frequency response of the Euclid. Now let's talk about other details. So as for detail, the Euclid is a fairly resolving IEM. It definitely has pretty good resolution that is representative of its price point, and I think the air is one of the contributing factors to this detail. Now, as for dynamics, the Euclid is okay. I was expecting actually to be a little bit more dynamic given its price point. It's not super compressed. It's better than most BA setups I've heard, but it's not as good as like the premier single dynamic driver IEMs like the Dunu Luna. But it's decently punchy, has decent micro and macro dynamics, but a little bit of like that planar compression to me. Now, as for head stage, it is, I would say, above average in terms of width, and imaging, I would say, is about on par, if not slightly above average. Nothing crazy in those regards, but slightly above average. Now, in terms of timbre, it's a little bit off. I think the frequency response messes with it a bit, and it's a bit plasticky to me, better than most BA setups again, but not quite as good as some of the better single dynamic driver IEMs out there. And I believe that is about all we have to cover in terms of sound on the Audeze Euclid. Okay, so now let's talk about some comparisons here and my final thoughts. So the Euclid is a bit weird. It has decent technicalities, but the tuning is a bit off. It's a little bit shouty and a little bit bright, and sounds oddly a little congested to me. I'm not sure why, but something about it sounds a little bit off-putting and a little bit congested to my ear. Now, as for some comparisons, so there's other planar-magnetic IEMs on the market. We, of course, recently reviewed the Tin Audio P2. These are much cheaper, and the Euclid absolutely stomps them. No surprise. The much better technicalities, way better tuned because the P2 is bright. Much bigger, but of course, no, I don't think really anybody expected the P2 to be beating out the Euclid. Now, compared to some of Audeze's own iSines, I used to own the iSine 20 years ago. I think I sold it before I even got into reviewing. And then this is the Audeze's cheaper model, the iSine LX, which these are like $200, which is they're just a cheaper version of the iSine 10. The Euclid, compared to this, which is not really a very fair comparison because this is an open back, which is completely different use cases. But the Euclid is better tuned than any of the iSines by default. Not that I particularly think the Euclid's tuning is that amazing, but it's better than any of the iSines. The iSines are pretty much horrendous unless you use some sort of EQ with them. And it's definitely a step up over the iSine LX and I'm from memory, the iSine 20. But again, they're much, much more expensive than both of those iSines. I've not heard the i4 yet. I would actually like to check that out at some point. But yeah, the Euclid is definitely better than the iSines in those regards. So let's talk about non-planar magnetic IEMs in this price bracket. So these are $1,300. So ones that come up immediately. Andromeda, is it better than the Andromeda? In some ways, yes. I want to say it's better tuned. It has mid-range, and it has some upper treble, but it sounds a little more congested than the Andromeda to me. I think the Andromeda is a little bit more resolving, a little airier sounding, and I think has a little bit better separation and layering than the Euclid does. The Euclid, I think, has got better bass. It's a little bit more dynamic overall. Slightly better timbre, and slightly better tuned, but still somewhat off to me. Sony IR M9, from memory, might be a little more resolving. Haven't had that one at home to try yet. But M9 much better tuned than the Euclid from memory. I think the timbre on it might be slightly better. The M9's got really good timbre for balanced armature setup. Bass on the Euclid I think was better because M9 still has some of that BA bass. Other ones that come to mind, for $13, same price as Campfire Aura, which I think you all know my opinions on the Aura. Definitely Euclid over that. Campfire Solaris, I would take this over the Solaris. Solaris is not great either. High Edition Viento is much cheaper than this. I like the Viento more than I like this. This definitely has some advantages to this. Definitely has better bass overall. And I think it's a little better in terms of overall macro dynamics, but the Viento is much better tuned, really nice air, really good detail and everything on that as well. Dunu Luna is a tough one. The Luna I really like except for the tuning. The Luna is just really shouty and bright, but it's got great detail and it's so dynamic and it's really, really nice. I would probably own a Luna if it was tuned better. Would I take it over the Euclid? Probably for me, but I think the Euclid is better tuned and does a few things better. So the Euclid is it's a weird one to me. It does some things well, but the tuning is a little bit off for me. It's a little too shouty and a little too bright. And I think they need to retune the mids just a bit and tweak the treble a little bit. I think it would be a lot more compelling. The problem with it is that it doesn't really completely fail at much of anything, but it's just like, it's like in the middle of everything, right? Where it's like, it's okay tuned, but there's better tuned stuff for the price. It has okay technicalities, but there's better technicalities for the price. So Euclid's a bit of a weird one to me. I like it, but it's going to be a hard one for me to recommend straight out. If you want to try a closed back planar magnetic IEM and maybe you want to EQ it a bit, because a lot of planars take well to EQ, then by all means go ahead. But will it become like the default recommendation in this price bracket? I don't think so personally. But all in all, I'm glad to see that Audeze is closing off some the backs of their planar magnetic IEMs. I would say that I more or less like the Euclid, but I think there are some tweaks that need to be made for the next version. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Audeze Euclid. Once again, thanks to Audeze for providing these for review. I will link where to buy these in the description below, as well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.